Okay, what I'm going to cover today is the concept of floaters. Now, what floaters are is a kind of a trick, an optical trick that we use in modeling, in which that we're able to get the illusion that something is cut into a piece of geometry, like these little divots that are in the top here, or like these little bar divots that are on the edge here. So what I have is a piece of geometry that I've created it with this from a spline, and then I've come in and I've put it together in such a way that it looks like that I've actually sculpted all this and put all these into this actual piece of geometry, and it's all just really an illusion. People use floaters quite a bit in the gaming industry to create normal maps, but the way I use it is a little bit different because I'm not doing for gaming, I'm doing it for actual production. And so I can't really have the objects floating over the top. They have to actually be floating right down and look like they're embedded into it. And I've been doing this for a long time. I'll show you kind of the technique that I use. Okay. So let's switch over here to Max. Okay. So what I have here is a piece of geometry that I've already created, and I created it from a spline. And I've got the original spline here. Now I'm going to use this spline as a way to get my divots aligned to this. So to create those kind of divots that are on the outside, I'm just going to use a sphere. So I'm just going to create a sphere that would be approximately about the size of what I want in there. Okay. I'm going to do this pretty quick. Now I could measure this and everything, but this is about what I want, is something that would be able to just float right through this area in here, maybe a little bit smaller. I don't need a lot of geometry in these because these are going to be small little divots in there. So I'm just going to leave it at the default. Okay. So I'm just going to put just a gray shader on it. Okay, just a regular standard shader, which is good for modeling. I don't use them for rendering, but for modeling is fine. And now that I have this, I only need the back half of this. So I'm just going to convert it to a poly and grab these top pieces and to delete those. And go. So I'm going to have something like this. Now, I want this to have a manufactured edge to catch a highlight around it. So I'm going to want a form of a bevel on here. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab the edge and pull it up a little bit and then scale that out, which will give me a little beveled edge around that. Okay. And that's pretty much what I need. The only thing I got to do now is the normals are flipped on this. Okay. So I need to flip the normals because we're going to be rendering the inside. So let's grab all that and flip that. And so our little piece is set now. Okay, to get them on around this, I'm just going to use the spacing tool. So I'll grab my object, go to Tools, Align, and grab the spacing tool. And then I pick my path, and then I can determine how many of these I want around here. Okay, and I'm going to go for 23. Okay. And I'm making these all as instances. The reason I'm doing as instances is because later I'm going to come back and I'm going to alter this piece a little bit, and I want it to update all of those. So I'm going to build it as an instance. And so now I can pick all of these. Okay. And I'm just going to move them down. And where I want them right now for this first part is just to barely float above that surface. Okay. I don't want them to penetrate into it. It's got, the whole piece has to be floating above it like that. Okay. Now later I'm going to put them down in further, but for right now, that's what I need. Okay. All right. So we're going to go back into the top view, and I'm just going to hide this one right now. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a mask for this that's going to actually, I'm going to use on my shader to create holes in this piece, okay? To do that, what I want to do is to create a couple of shaders. And so I'm just going to use some standard shaders on this. I use standard shaders to do some, when I'm creating my mask, because they're kind of stupid shaders. They don't calculate a lot of information. right out of the box, which is what I want. And so I'm going to want these, one of them to be black and one of them to be white. Okay. So this one is Blackie. And this is Whitey. Now, I'm doing these to generate a mask that I'm going to use to make the shader transparent. Okay, so on the black, the only thing I need to do is make sure it has no glossiness. Okay, then it's fine, it's just solid black. The white one I need a little bit different, and this one I need it to be 100% self-illuminated. Okay, so it'll be like that. I don't need to make this one self-illuminated, but I need this one to be self-illuminated. Okay, so initially what I'm going to do is just pick everything, and I go ahead and just put the Blackie on it. And then for the base that I've got, I'm going to put Whitey on that one. Okay. And then I'm going to want to render out a pretty good size file on here so I can keep my resolution. So I'm going to initially come in here and do a custom setup and maybe make this so about maybe 1800 by 1800. And then I'm just going to zoom in on this and get as close as I can to filling up the screen, but I do want to leave space all the way around it. Okay, and then I can render that. Okay. Now, okay, let's see what we got going here. Okay, what I'm going to want to do here, I forgot, is I have Mental Ray on. I'm going to turn Mental Ray off. I want to use the scanline renderer for this. And I also have already lit this, so I've got an exposure control on. So I'm just going to temporarily turn that off. And I want to make sure that I have black set in my background, which it is by default. So blacken your background. So what this is going to do is going to render it a white piece with black holes in it and a black background. Okay, now I do have some lights I went ahead and put in here to set this up, and I'm just going to go ahead and turn those off. I don't need them for what I'm doing right now. And now I should be able to render this. It'll render pretty quick. And then that's going to give me a black around the outside and inside, and then white for my object and black holes on it. Okay, then I'm just going to save this, and I'm going to save this as a Targa file. Actually, I'm going to save it as a PNG file. And we're just going to call this top mask. And since this is just black and white, I'm going to save this as a 8-bit grayscale. Will work just fine for what I've got there. And so now what I want to do is open that in Photoshop. Okay. So in Photoshop, I want to go in here and let's make a layer. And I'm going to grab all of the black areas on the outside and the inside. And on another layer, I'm going to fill that with white. Now, that'll leave me a little bit of a little aliased edge on there. So while I've got it still selected, I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to go Stroke, and I'm going to fill it. I've got 8 pixels centered, and I'm going to fill that with white. And then that'll fill over that aliased edge. So when I deselect this, I'll just have completely white, which is opaque, with the black holes, which is transparent. Okay. So now I'll just save this back out, and I'm going to save it as a PNG again. And okay, top mask, call this final. And so now I'll be able to use that as a mask for holes on the top of this. Okay. So now that I've got this done, then I'll turn off that safe frame. So now I want to take these and I want to go ahead and I want to place those down so that they're almost totally penetrating into it, but they leave me a little bit of a lip on there. And then the other thing I'm going to do now is I want to give them a little bit of an overlap lip. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, since they're instances of this, I can come in here and grab this one, scale it, holding down the shift key, and scale out a little bit to give me a little bit of a lip popping on here. This will make sure that we don't have any kind of a, where we can see through it, okay, because this is going to be transparent, so we don't want to be able to see through it right there. So that lip's going to give us a little kind of like a little trap line around it. Okay, so now I'm going to pick all of these little spheres that I've put in there, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to their object properties, and I'm going to tell them to not cast shadows. Okay, that way they won't cast a shadow, because otherwise, since they're floating a little bit, you'd have a little bit of a shadow on there. We don't want them casting shadows. Now, we still want them to receive shadows. We don't want them to cast shadows. And since I'm going to be using mental ray to render with, I need to go on this advanced lighting tab in here too. And I need to do the same thing here and turn off cast shadows here too. Okay. So I'm not doing that on my base piece, just on these little divots so that they can't cast a shadow, so that they'll look like they're actually embedded into this. Okay. So now we need to make some shaders. Okay. So we're just going to leave these for later. We're going to use those again. That's just a garbage shader on there. And so now I'm ready to go ahead and turn my exposure control back on. And I'm going to put a gray back in my background so that it's not black. And let's turn our lights back on. So our tools, light lister, let's turn both these lights back on that I've already put in here. And okay, so we're ready to get our shaders. Okay. And we need to turn mental ray back on, because I'm going to use mental ray to render this with. So we'll turn it back on. And I'm going to use an arch and design shader. Okay. Now I'm going to make an arch and design shader, and this is going to be for my widget, the background widget. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and use a template. I'm going to use copper on this. So it's going to be a metallic look. I'm going to change the color in a few minutes. This particular shader is, I find it's got, to me, has a little bit of a problem in it, in that it's got the anisotropic filter reading a vertex mapping channel to determine its alignment, and that'll give you some kind of weird artifacts sometimes. Let's see if we can see it here. As a matter of fact, if you look real close on this shading, can you see these kind of little weird artifacts that are in here? This will pop up. I'm not sure why they did it that way, but it is do some weird stuff. So you want to turn that off, and you'll see now I don't have those artifacts in there anymore. Okay, so this is going to be on my base object. Okay, so I'm going to pick it and assign that to it. Okay, that's going to go on that. And then I want another version of this exact same thing. So I'm going to hold down my control my shift key, and drag it over. And these are going to be my widget divots. So I'm going to have two different shaders. One shader that's on this actual widget. I'm going to call this the widget. And then one shader that's on all the divots. So I'm going to pick all of the spheres. I don't have to apply it to my original one here. And I'm going to put these divots on it. Okay. Now, to change the color of this, instead of coming into here and changing this color, I'm going to go ahead and drive this with a color correction node. Okay. Now, the reason I'm going to do that is so that I can plug it into both of these, and I can control their color at the same time with this controller. Okay. And we're going to kind of make this a little bit more gray, not quite so yellow, something like that, more of a kind of a pewter kind of look. Okay. And I'm going to do a similar thing here, and I'm just going to hold down my shift key, and I'm going to copy this node. Okay, let's label this one. This is our metal color. Okay, and this is going to be our metal glossiness. Okay, and so this needs to be white initially, and then we're going to plug this into our glossiness setting. Okay. Now what this is going to do is it's going to override this setting right here of 4. Okay. Now we're going to be driving the glossiness with a map. Okay. The benefit of that is that I can control the glossiness of both of these, you know, how matte or glossy I want them to be, with one node instead of having to keep coming back in here and changing each one of these to what I want it to be. Okay. I wish they would do the same thing with the reflectivity, but they don't. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. Maybe, let's go maybe a 0.4 on that. Let's go 0.6. So I'm going to change both of these to 0.6, and I want it to be a better quality render. So I'm going to put 16 samples in my glossiness on both of those. Main thing is that both these shaders are exactly the same. Okay. Now on this widget, I need to come in from the top viewport, and I need to create a UVW map on it. Okay. So that it has a mapping coordinate. All right. And so I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to go a cutout. There's a cutout node on this particular one, and I'm going to go to standard bitmap, and I'm going to load that top mask into that node. Okay. And so it's going to make little holes in this. Now I'm going to have a problem with this, and I'm going to show it to you. So let's just isolate this, and we'll go ahead and show it in our viewport, and the alignment's going to be off. Okay. Now the reason the alignment's off is because in Photoshop, when I initially created this, I created it, and so it's a little bit bigger. Okay. And so this needs to be cropped. I need it to be a bounding box that's the exact shape of this. And so it's easy to do now that I've got this selected. So all I got to do is come to get our magic wand, and I'm going to pick this layer, pick that outside piece, invert that selection, and then crop it. Tell it to crop itself. And now that is the smallest bounding box that this can fit in, which is exactly what my mapping coordinate is. Okay. So now I can turn this back on, and now save this back over the top. That was a PNG we were saving it as. And I can save it back over the top of that. And then that'll update it back into max. And now those holes are in the right place. Okay. So what we're doing here is now matter of fact, we'll do it before we turn these back on. Go into a perspective view, and let's just render. Matter of fact, let's change to a HD render 1280 and render this. And now what you're going to see is that now I'm able to render this piece, and I'm going to keep the quality kind of down right now, so these are render faster. And it's got holes in it. Okay. With that cutout map, everywhere that I had black, it's going to create a hole in there. Okay. And it's just an illusion. So I didn't really have to model the hole in there. I'm just dropping it in with the shader. Okay. So now I can come in here and unhide all of these little spheres. And so when I render that, and now you'll have all of those little pieces in there, and they'll seem like that they're stitched into that. And I've got that little manufactured edge. Now it's got some shading anomalies on that, and I'll fix that in a second because of the way I did it. But now you'll see that when this comes up, that it looks like those are actually stitched in and are down in there. And I didn't have to build this with subdivision surfaces. I see so many people have subdivision-itis. They think everything's got to be built subdivision-itis. You don't have to build everything subdivided. I build this piece so much faster than anybody could ever build this doing subdivision services. and it'll look exactly the same. Okay. Now, if you look close, you'll see some little serrations on this little edge in here. And that's because of the smoothing groups are not set up correctly on it. So I want to deal with that. But other than that, this looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to stop that. And I need to unhide. Now remember that this is all instances. So if I come in on this one and I turn off my wire, you'll see those little edges in there. Okay, so what I want to do is hold down my shift key, hold down the control polygons, and then I'm going to make this a small angle, maybe 15 degrees, auto smooth that, and then that'll fix that so that I don't get those little facets in there. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our view. Restore our view. And then let's just do a little region render right over here. You can see that faceting pretty good right there. I'll just re-render that, and you'll see that now it's going to take that faceting out where I get a nice smooth highlighter on that edge, and it will do it for all of them because they're all instances of that other one. Okay, let's another thing you might want to do sometimes, the problem that you're going to have is this hole that it's projecting is going all the way through the bottom. So in other words, if I tilt this up, that hole is going to be in the bottom too. Okay. To fix that, I'm going to put this shader on here to sub-object level. So what I'm going to do is to pick this object, and I'm going to apply the shader that I made for the divots on that. Okay. So now it won't have that hole on the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is just, I'm going to turn my ignore back facing on so I don't accidentally pick something else. And I'm just going to pick this top piece right here and then assign this to it. And therefore that opacity map will only be on that top edge, but will not be on the bottom. Okay. All right, let's do a similar thing. Let's go in here and let's put some little divots down in this edge like I did in the original one. Okay, so in the original one, I've got some little divots in here. So let's go ahead and put those in. Okay, it's pretty much the same way, but it's a little bit different. So we'll go to the top view, and we're going to go to extended primitives. And we can do an oil take, we can do a capsule, doesn't really matter. So we want this to be a little bit smaller than those. Okay, maybe something like that. And let's go a little bit, I want the height smaller, let's make the radius a little bit less. So bring it in a little bit smaller, maybe something like that will work okay. All right, so we'll come into the top of that, and then we're going to do the same thing. Okay, let's go ahead and convert that to an editable poly, and then select the front and delete those off. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to be using this same shader on it that I've got on the other divot, so I'm just going to go ahead and assign that to it. And then we need to create us a little chamfered edge on that too. So I'm just going to grab that, hold down my shift key, and pull it up the distance. Now, the thing on this is I can't really use the scale to get that because it's going to have a problem that it won't scale properly. So if I come in from the front, and I'll show you this, okay, that if I scale this to get it bigger, okay, you'll see that it's not the same all the way around that. Okay, so what you want to do is to put a push modifier on it. A push modifier will actually scale it out, but with everything being the same distance all the way around it. And then that'll get me my little faceted edge on there. Okay, I can bake that in. And then let's go ahead and convert that to polygons and go ahead and do an auto smooth on that at 15, same as I did on the other one. And then I need to flip all of my normals on it. Okay, and that should get me a good looking piece. Okay, so now we're going to come to the front and do the same thing we did before. I'm going to float that right in front of it. We'll say right about there in height. Hold down my shift key. Okay, we're going to make 3 of those as instances. Okay, and then the same thing. We don't want these. We're going to go to object properties, and we don't want these to cast shadows in mental ray and cast shadows here. Okay, so I'm going to go up here to my edit, and I'm just going to click hold so I can come back to this. What I'm going to do now is go back to actually before I do the whole, I'm going to go to the front view, and I'm going to put another UVW map on here. Okay, and I'm going to do view align, so it aligns to my viewport and fits. And I'm going to put this on map channel 2. And this will give me a second mapping coordinate that's facing the front that I need for this. So I've got the top one that's going to use the bitmap that's up here, and then another one that's going to use the bitmap projecting from the front, and then it's going to be on channel 2. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to hold that. Now, what hold does, if you've not used it before, is it's going to freeze this, and then I can fetch it and come back to here. And the reason I want to do that is because I've already got my shaders on these, and I want to overwrite these for a second. So I want these 3 little widgets to remember to use by black shader. And then this uses my white shader. And then we go back, same thing. I need on my exposure control. I need to turn that off. I need this to be black. And then I need to turn off mental ray. I really don't have to turn off my lights because they won't register anyway. And turn off region and render. There's my mask. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay, we'll just call this edge mask. And I'll save this as a PNG also. Okay, then we're going to do the same little trick again. We're going to go into Photoshop. We'll open it up. And I'm just going to go ahead and select the black part out here. I'm going to invert that selection and image crop. Notice I do that instead of using the crop tool. It's because it's more accurate. Okay. And so now I just need to fill these little end pieces with white so they don't show up. Okay. They wouldn't show up anyway, but I was going to make sure. And let's make sure. Get anything on there. Okay. So there's my mask for the edge. So I save that out. And we're going to call this final. Okay. So now I can go back here. Now what I can do is hit my fetch. And now it's going to fetch me right back to where I was before I put those shaders on there. And so now we need to build the shader for this. So what we want is this same shader again, this one right here. Hold down the shift key and drag that. Okay. And this is going to be my widget edge. Divots. If I can spell. Okay. And then I'm going to hold down this bitmap. I'm going to hold down my shift key and copy it. Okay. Now this one, I'm going to name this. This is the top mask. And remember, it's on channel 1. And then I'm going to go to this one and I'm going to replace it with this edge mask. Okay. And remember, it's on channel 2. Okay. So we're going to call this one edge mask. And then it will plug into this cutout. And so now I can go to my sub object here and I'm going to pick that poly right there because that's the one they set into. And I'm going to put this shader in that. Now, since all these shaders have the same color and have the same glossiness and reflectivity, you won't see a shift. Even though it's 3 different shaders, you won't see a shift because they're all treated the same way. Okay, so now all I need to do is to embed these guys in. So they float out just a hair. Okay, and then I need to go back to my original little widget. And let's zoom in on that. And so then the same thing again. I'm going to grab the edge and just going to pull that out a hair. I don't want it too much. Oops. Okay, just a hair. And then with that still selected, I can put a push modifier on this. And then push that out, which gets me my little trap edge around it. And since that's an instance, it went ahead and did it for all those other ones. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and hide these pieces. And view, we need to go to perspective, restore our view, and now we'll just do a little bit of a region render. Just that area right there. And then that's going to get me those little divots along the edge in there. Okay. And so now, really quickly, without having to build a lot of geometry and have to, subdivide and cut all this in. I see people doing that all the time to subdivide. It's like, oh my gosh, what the hell are you doing? You don't have to have subdivision-itis. You subdivide when it's a benefit. You don't subdivide when it's not a benefit. Okay, now here's the thing. I see people making mistakes all the time. They'll go, okay, so now that I have this all done, I'm going to take this object, I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to go to Edit Poly and attach all these pieces to it. You can't do that. You can't attach them. The shaders would stay intact and everything, but then you would lose the ability to tell it to not calculate a shadow. Okay, so what we do at that point is we grab the whole thing and we group them. Okay, and so now this will all move around the same together. Okay. All right, and that's how I ended up getting this piece. Okay, it's exactly how I did it. Now, I've got a little background that I put in there. That's just got tiles on it. Now, another thing that people ask me is like, okay, well, how do I create an AO for that? Okay, well, that is a little tricky. Okay, and I'll show you how you have to do that. Is the first thing you're going to do is you're going to hide all those little widgets, and then you're going to render an AO pass with just with the little divots where you just have the widget by itself, so that we don't have those little divots in there. Okay. All right. Let's. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is hide that widget and just leave the divots up here. And then I'm going to render an AO pass with that. Okay. And then I can stack the two on top of each other. Now, the problem you're going to have is you're going to see the edge where this renders in some of these, okay? And that we don't need that, okay? So what you're going to want to do is render a mask pass, okay? Now, the way to do that is, let's go ahead and save this, is we're going to come in here and make a couple of shaders, okay? And what we want is two shaders, okay? And we want to use standard shaders for this, okay? So we're going to make two shaders. This is bluey. And hold down with shift, copy this. This is greeny. Okay, bluey. We want bluey to be blue. Guess what? Blue. Okay, now it's got to be set 255 for blue and 0 and 0 on your red and green. So it's pure blue. Okay. Then on this greeny, we're doing the same thing too, but we need a 255 on the green and 0 on the blue and red. Okay. Now I could have done it red. It could have been blue and green or green and red or red and blue. You have 3 RGB channels. Doesn't matter. I'm just using blue and green. So now the other thing you have to do is these have to be 100% self-illuminated. Okay. Both these have to be 100% self-illuminated, which means lights won't affect them. Okay. So we're going to pick all of our, you have to open the group. Don't ungroup it. Just open the group. And then we want to pick everything except for the widget. Okay. So we're picking all of our little divots and we're going to make them green. Okay. And then we're going to pick our widget and we're going to make it blue. Okay. And then what we're going to do is go to our rendering and go to our environment. And we want to turn off our exposure control. And we want to turn the background and we want it to be blue. Okay. So 255 here and there. Okay. And then at the same thing on this is we want scanline renderer. We don't want mental ray. And okay, so you'll get something like this, okay? And this is not exactly what we want, but it's pretty close, okay? So the final thing we have to do is we have to plug our opacity maps into this blue shader, okay, to make it transparent where we want it. So what we got to do here is, the problem is that we have 2 bitmaps that we need to plug into this. So we're going to stack them. So we're going to go to our opacity setting right here. And I'm going to go to standard and I'm going to get a composite node. Okay. And then we'll plug this one into the first slot. Okay. And then on that composite node, I can add another layer. This is like layers in Photoshop. And so I can drop this one into the second layer. And then I'm going to turn this on to darken, which will put these both together. Okay. And so now when I render, there, I've got a perfect mask, okay? So I can save that out, and I can take it into Photoshop. Here I was using red and blue, but you can do the same thing. And then we're taking that, and we're putting it into our channels to generate a mask. And so then I can come in and actually use that layer mask. And let me turn this back on, which is what I did here. And I'm going to enable the layer mask. And so now turn that on to multiply. And then that's dropping. It's very subtle, but that's dropping me my AO into these little widgets and into those. Okay. And then I've got my AO on the outside piece, and I've got those both together to get me my final thing. Okay, so hopefully that kind of explains how to do this. I use this all the time. It's a really fast way to be able to get all kinds of little details and stuff into something. Yes, they're floaters, but it's an advanced way to do it, so you can't tell it's floaters. So if you come in at a certain angle, you can't tell this is ever floating and not actually cut in. It gives you a very nice look. It's very fast. I don't have to get into building subdivision services and doing all that crap of subdivision services to get a piece together like this. Very fast, building with splines and using floaters with opacity maps to get your final piece to put together. Okay, hopefully that gave you some ideas on ways that you can approach some of the things you're doing. All right, thank you.